Class 198 on the Golden Doves, page 119. We're going to be dealing now with, and really we've been dealing with this matter for the last few classes. How did God transmit the message in Har Sinai to the minds of the Jewish people? Right, so we've been talking about the golden doves, the oraculum, and then the silver dots, so there's the oraculum, the thought, and then there's the articulation. So let's continue on the top of page 119. How was the divine message communicated to the people at Sinai, to Am Yisrael? Machloket. Rabbinic tradition has preserved two opposing views. Rabbi Yochanan, the highest rabbinic authority of his time, maintained that a malach, angel, representative of God, explained the divine message to every Israelite. So every Israelite had a malach that came to that individual, and the malach explained the message that God wanted to transmit to that individual. This view presupposes that the author communicates through the text. Right. In a sense, every text is malach of the person who wrote the text. Right? So that text is a malach meant to transmit the message to the reader. Interesting. The text is a mere instrument, a kind of linguistic conductor. I think here he means conductor maybe in the sense of a train conductor, so he takes the train from one stop to another. Transmitting the mind of the author, of course. So that's what the words do. The words are there to transmit the mind of the author, and it takes us through a journey in the author's mind. The linkage with the author is both formal and irrevocable. The linkage between the text and the author is a formal, because it's formal in the sense that the author is presenting this text as his message, right? And it's irrevocable. Once he transmits the text and we receive the text, that's it. Grasping a text may be compared to having a malach, or representative of the author, explaining the original idea behind it. So when you read a text and you understand the text, that's like having a representative of the author, because that's what the text is. It's a representative of the author explaining to you the message of the author, the original idea, right? So the text is not just a text, it's an original idea. This view was rejected by his colleagues. That was everything we said until now was Rabbi Yochanan. His colleagues rejected him. The second opinion, transmitted in the name of the rabbis, ascertains that the oraculum itself spoke to the people, not a malach. So rather, it was almost like the mind of God produced the oraculum, which is the thought, let's say. And this thought is what contacted the Jewish people. Right. But the rabbis say it was the utterance itself that returned to every Israelite and asked him, so it's actual God's actual words speaking to the Jewish people. Do you accept me? Well, what do you think of this, what I'm saying? God is speaking directly through the oraculum. Such and such commandments are contained in me. Right? Here are the mitzvot. Such and such laws are contained in me. Right? Such and such decrees, such and such ordinances, such and such a fortiori reasonings are in me. So the oraculum is speaking to the Jewish people and having a conversation with the Jewish people, and it wants to get the consent of the Jewish people, that the Jewish people accept the oraculum. And he would respond, yes, and yes. The person hearing the oraculum would say, yes, I accept this. Thereupon, the utterance would kiss him on the mouth. It was the oraculum teaching him the Torah. That's Shir Hashem Rabban. That's why it says, Yishakeni Mineshikot pihu is the oraculum seeking the approval of the person receiving the oraculum, and the person would accept it, and then it would kiss him as an act of love, and that's the end of the quote. Okay, according to this opinion, a text is independent of the author. It uses the author rather than the other way around. So according to the Yochanan, the text is the shaliach of the author. And the point of the text is to bring us into the mind of the author and to take us through a train journey through the mind of the author. According to the second opinion, the oraculum, which is the message, right, contained in the words, detaches itself, so to speak, from the author and goes directly to the people, and the people now interact with the oraculum, and the oraculum seeks the approval of the people, the consent of the people. So you see that there's a separation between God and the oraculum, right? This view seems to have been corroborated by the Talmudic principle: the Torah is not in the heavens, lo b'shamayim, because there's a disconnect. God spoke it, so the word is not God, the word comes from God. That is, the heavens have no authority in the interpretation of the Torah. God may not explain his own words, because the goal is not to enter the mind of the author, but rather the text, once it's given, it exists independently, and now we can interact with the text. Footnote 7. On this basis, it was established that judges do not have the right to be interpreters of their own legal decisions. Interesting. So once a judge issues a legal decision, let's say they write down a legal decision or they issue a legal decision, that legal decision has an independent status. It's, so to speak, a decree of the court. And let's say we want to understand what that decree means. I mean, certainly the judge who wrote the decree is something of interest, but we're interested in the words of the decree themselves, right? So if the judge kind of says, no, I meant this or I meant that, well, we're looking at the decree or the judgment. Maybe the better word is judgment, right? Not decree. Sira bi Moshe Metz, Tevshuvot Maharam means the rabbis also distinguish between a text representing the wisdom of the author, which cannot be considered sacred, okay, and a text which is independent of the author. Very interesting. So you see the difference between a text which represents the author's mind or wisdom, that doesn't have Kedusha. What has Kedusha is when the text is, so to speak, masur to the people, and how it detaches itself from the author. That's what has Kedusha. The latter is written by the Holy Spirit. That is, the author is only the instrument of the text. Such texts may be the subjects of derasha. Right? Okay, let's continue. Because derasha, by its nature, is the interaction between the reader and the text itself, independent of the author. That's what derasha is, right? All right, that's the end of the footnote. Let's go back to the main text. According to this opinion, a text is independent of the author. It uses the author rather than the other way around. That's fascinating. This view seems to be corroborated by the Talmudic principle. The Torah is not in the heavens. Yeah, I'm rereading the same thing. I'm sorry, I'm skipping. Obviously, the view of Rabbi Yochanan's colleagues here and the view that the oraculum communicated to the people, the Torah in the mind of God, are the same. So the Chachamim that are Cholkim on Rabbi Yochanan, that say that it was the actual words that communicated with the Jewish people directly, independent of God, is similar to or is the same as the view that we brought in the Midrash Shir Shirim Rabbah at the beginning of this chapter. Golden doves we shall make for you. That is the Torah, that the oraculum taught in the mind of the Almighty. That opinion is the opinion of the Chachamim, the Rachokim and the Yochanan. Okay. The idea that an oraculum communicates the mind of the first person is a rejection of phonocentrism. Okay, so give me a moment while I get my dictionary. Phonocentrism. Let's see. What is phonocentrism? My apologies for the interruption in the video, but I do have now my iPad, and hopefully I'll be able to get an answer to that. What is phono? I mean, of course, phono has to do with phonetics, right? Centrism means the centrality of phonetics. So let's first see, what is phonocentrism? Okay, then we can understand what my father is saying. The belief that sounds and speech are inherently superior to or more primary than written language or silent language. You see, that makes sense. So that's phonocentrism. And it's a term formulated by Derrida, right? So phonocentrism, the speech is greater than the written text, and that's part of the Greek aversion to written text, right? Because they say that in dialogue, there's dialogue and there's a written text. So phonocentrism favors dialogue. So in dialogue, according to the Greeks, dialogue is greater than the written text, because in dialogue you can ask the author, well, what do you mean when you say that? And explain this to me and explain that to me. So the Greeks considered phonocentrism to be superior to the written text. So coming back to what my father is writing, the idea that an oraculum communicates the mind of the first person is a rejection of phonocentrism, because the oraculum is the text, which is separate from the author, right? Traditionally, Jewish commentators explained the verse, and all the people saw the voices, to mean that God's speech was perceived visually. You see it, right? That is, in a non-auditory way. The Israelites read the voices, even when God was speaking to the Jewish people. How's that for a rejection of Greek phonocentrism? We're reading the voices as if though it was the text. The fact that the scroll of the Hebrew Scriptures contains only consonants, a vocalized scroll is ritually invalid in unpronounceable text. So therefore, the Chumash is an unpronounceable text, right? Because there's no vowels in the Sefer Torah, right? Yeah. Implies a glossomatic view of language. A glossomatic view of language. My father discussed that on page 72, 73. And forgive me, I'm going to check in a moment. Okay. Let's say, what is that? A glossomatic? Okay. Let me see. Implies a glosse. That's with an E. Glossomatic. Okay. System of linguistics, or a system of linguistic analysis based on the distribution and interrelationship of glossemes. And the glossemes are the smallest meaningful units of a language. Interesting. So let's see. I'm going to read a little more about this. So the glossemes are the smallest units in the text that still have meaning, and that could probably be smaller than the word, because the word can contain different glossemes in it, right? Right, so glossomatics is an approach to the study of language carried on mainly in Denmark. So it represents, in general, a development of certain principles first put forward by Ferdinand de Saussure, who we read about in the previous sections of the book. In particular, the principle that the importance of the units of a language is that they are distinct from one another, right? Remember we discussed that meaning is in opposition, right? So rather than that they exhibit a particular concrete properties. So the glossameticians aim to devise a universal framework within which the description of particular languages could be carried out. Okay, so now going back to the text here. So the fact that the scroll of the Hebrew scriptures contain only consonants implies a glossomatic view of language. Why is it? Why is it the fact that it contains only consonants implies a glossomatic view of language? I'm not sure, because the glossomatics aim to devise a universal framework within which the description of particular languages can be carried out. That's interesting. I think that the idea, perhaps, is that when you have an unvocalized text, you have words standing in opposition to each other. And that conforms certainly with Ferdinand de Saussure's concept of meaning being first and foremost an oppositional meaning, meaning the word Abraham is not the word Yitzhak. So whatever positive meaning you give to those words, but the starting point is Abraham is not Yitzhak, so the Aleph is not the Bet, and the Gimel is not the Vav, right? I think that's the idea of the consonantal text having no positive meaning. It's an unpronounceable text. The two levels of language symbolized by the golden doves with silver dots parallel the semiotic and semantic, that is, sharah and ma'ana, right? The semiotic mean the conventional meaning of the words as understood by the speaking public, whereas ma'ana is when you combine words and you create a certain tension which generates a meaning. So it's semantic, right? The essential, that's the difference between semiotics, where words are symbols, and semantics, where the combination of words create meaning. The essential disconnection between these two levels, which as gold and silver cannot be welded, leads to one of the most important insights into the nature of language. So the same way you can't weld the gold and the silver, you can't weld the semiotics and the semantics, right? They must be disconnected. Unlike the semiotic, where each sign has a definite value in isolation, a flower is a flower, a pen is a pen, right? But the components of a semantic unit, like color in a painting or sound in a musical composition, are significant only in association, not in isolation. So if I sing do, that's sound, but if that sound is in opposite, do, a deer, a female deer. So then you hear a melody, because I'm sorry for I don't sing Western music, as you may have just inferred from the last 30 seconds. My goal was not to impress you with my Western musical skills, but rather it was to impart upon you the idea that a tone standing by itself has no flavor, has no meaning. But when you put it in opposition to other tones, suddenly it creates this musical, soothing, beautiful sound, if I was a good singer. All right. Let's see. So let's continue. The significance of a semantic composition is the effect of interpretation. So even when I do, do, a deer, a female deer, you're interpreting it. You're putting together that sound. If I was to sing some horrible Indian song, you'd be like, oh, is that disgusting? Because you're not putting it together in the right way. So it sounds like cacophonous. So you need to interpret and put together the tones in the right way in order to create sound, right? That's semantics. So you need interpretation. Prior to interpretation, there is ambiguity or perplexity. This ambiguity involves the reader in a creative process. He must choose one of several alternatives. Concerning scripture, it was taught that there are 70 faces to the Torah, Shevim Panim La Torah. That is, the Torah could be interpreted in 70 ways. These 70 ways correspond to the 70 nations or 70 languages. So since each nation has a unique way of processing reality and putting things together, there are Shivim Panim La Torah, precisely because there's no vowels, no vocalization, no vowels of the letters of the Torah because it's glossomatic. So the idea, therefore, is that's why Shivim Panim La Torah, because you can put together the words differently. You have Jews from all over the world, right? Right. So this corresponds to the 70 nations or 70 languages, which according to the rabbis, make up the totality of mankind. More significantly, even within a single face, there are as many variables as there are individuals making up that nation. In fact, because every individual is a bit unique and therefore might have a slightly unique perspective, even if you're from within the same culture and language and nation. In fact, the mystics taught that there are 600,000 faces to the Torah, equal to the number of Israelites standing at the foot of Mount Sinai. With Barthes, we may say that at the semantic level, the reader is actually a producer of the text. Because by connecting this music and how you hear the music as you hear it, you in a sense created that music, right? But do, dear, you don't have to connect the sounds. Fi, man, right? I'm not connecting the sounds, so you're not connecting in your mind. That's not pleasing. It just sounds like individual tones. But you connect it. Do, a deer, a female deer, right? So now you're connecting it. So your mind is producing the sound. He determines his own contextual connections, thus creating the message and the text. So when you read the Torah, you can make different connections between different words and different letters. Okay, footnote 19. Okay.